Almost everyone who has ever heard anything about Japan knows this one. You take your shoes off at the door. It's probably the single most widely known fact about Japanese home customs. People in the West have heard about it, read about it, maybe even adopted a version of it in their own homes. It feels like a nice tradition, a considerate habit, a little cultural detail that sounds sensible when you think about it. But here's the thing. Most people who know the custom still don't know the real reason behind it. They think it's about politeness. They think it's about keeping carpets clean. They think it's a cultural tradition that predates modern floors and simply never got updated. They treat it like a charming quirk and then move on without realizing that it's actually one of the most consequential health and hygiene decisions you could make about your home, backed by genuinely striking research, with knock-on effects that reach into nearly every other room in the house and every other habit in your daily life. Today, I'm going to walk you through 7 reasons this practice matters, far beyond the most obvious one. And let me say upfront, and I want to be clear about this, some of what you're about to hear about what outdoor shoes carry into a home is specific enough that you might decide to adopt this habit before this video is finished. Stay with me until number 4, because it contains the research finding that convinced more health professionals than anything else on this list to change their own behavior at home. At the very end, I'll give you the simple 3-step transition for making this work practically. Let's get into it. Number 1. The Japanese entryway, the genkan, is designed specifically to make the shoe removal habit unavoidable. In a typical Japanese home, you don't walk through the front door directly onto the interior floor. You step into a sunken entryway, the genkan, which sits lower than the rest of the home by a few inches to a few centimeters. This step up from the genkan into the house is one of the most deliberate architectural details in traditional Japanese home design. It physically separates the outdoor world from the indoor world at the level of the floor itself. Shoes go off in the genkan at the lower level. You step up in socks or bare feet onto the elevated interior floor. The transition from outdoor to indoor is literal and physical, not just conceptual. You cannot forget to remove your shoes because the architecture enforces the habit. You'd have to step up with outdoor shoes on your feet, an awkward and intentional action to skip the transition. This design insight is more important than it sounds. One of the most reliable ways to make a habit stick is to build an environmental trigger that makes not doing the habit require more effort than doing it. The genkan is exactly that. The architecture makes shoe removal the path of least resistance. You step into the sunken entry, shoes come off naturally, you step up. The habit is built into the space. Compare this to a Western home where the front door opens directly onto carpet or floor. The shoe removal habit requires an active decision every single time. You have to remember to do it. You have to want to do it. And because it requires effortful choice rather than environmental default, it gets skipped whenever you're carrying something in a hurry or simply not thinking about it. Here's the shift. Create a physical trigger in your own entryway. A small mat, a shoe rack, a bench at the door. Make the transition zone visible enough that removing shoes becomes the natural first step before anything else. The architecture of your entry changes the habit before willpower ever has to get involved. Number 2. Research on what lives on the bottom of outdoor shoes consistently produces findings that most people find significantly more alarming than they expected. Studies examining the soles of shoes worn outside have found a remarkable variety of microbial passengers. Fecal bacteria, including strains of E. coli, which are deposited everywhere people and animals walk. Pesticides and herbicides from lawns, parks, and treated public areas. Heavy metals from road surfaces and industrial runoff, traces of gasoline and engine byproduct from parking lots and streets, various other environmental contaminants that are simply present wherever outdoor surfaces exist. One study from the University of Houston found that a significant majority of tested shoe soles carried coliform bacteria, a category that includes fecal indicator organisms. A study tracking shoe contamination and indoor floor contamination found that bacteria from the outside were reliably transferred to indoor floors by shoe soles, and that a meaningful portion of that bacteria remained viable on the interior floor surface for days. This matters specifically because of where those floor contaminants end up. Toddlers and young children spend significant time on the floor. Food gets dropped on the floor and picked up again. Bare feet walk the same surfaces and then get into beds. The floor is not a neutral surface that stays separate from the rest of daily life. It connects to everything. Japanese floor living, sitting on the floor, eating at low tables, sleeping on futons laid on tatami, is only possible because the floors are genuinely clean, in a way that outdoor shoe access makes impossible. Here's the shift. Pull up one image in your mind of what outdoor shoes walk through in an average day: parking lots, public restrooms, streets near trash containers, and then ask honestly whether that's something you want distributed across every surface in your home. The evidence suggests not. Number 3. Removing shoes at the door transforms the floor from a transit surface into a place you can actually use. This is the structural insight that makes the shoe removal habit about far more than cleanliness. When you know that your floors are genuinely clean, kept that way by a consistent barrier between outdoor and indoor shoe traffic, the floor becomes available for living in a way it simply isn't otherwise. You can sit on it without thinking twice. Children can play on it freely. You can stretch on it, lie on it, eat near it without anxiety about what you're exposing yourself to. Food dropped on the floor is an inconvenience rather than an automatic public health decision. A nap on the living room floor is pleasant rather than vaguely unpleasant to contemplate. Traditional Japanese home design is organized around floor-level living, and every element of that design, the low tables, the floor cushions, the futon sleeping arrangement, the tatami mats, only works properly if the floor is clean enough to justify the contact. The shoe removal habit is what enables the entire floor-level lifestyle. Without it, floor living is uncomfortable at best and unsanitary at worst. The Western home, where shoes are often worn throughout the house, has effectively seeded the floor as usable living space. It becomes a transit surface that you stand on and walk across but wouldn't comfortably sit or lie on. And that's a significant loss of available, flexible, zero-cost living space. Here's the shift. If you can establish a genuine shoes-off household, notice within the first month how your relationship with your floors changes. The floor becomes part of the space rather than just what holds everything else up. That shift in how you use the space is the real reward. Number 4. This is the one I promised. The finding that convinced health professionals to revisit their own home behavior. Research tracking the spread of lawn treatment chemicals, specifically the herbicide 2,4-D, from treated lawns into homes found that a substantial proportion of the 2,4-D detected in indoor air samples and on indoor surfaces could be traced to shoe track transfer from treated outdoor areas. This finding was significant enough because 2,4-D is a chemical with documented health concerns at sufficient exposure levels, and it was appearing inside homes specifically because shoes were carrying it in. The implication was direct. Chemicals applied to outdoor surfaces, whether lawn treatments, road treatments, or the various industrial compounds that coat urban surfaces, don't stay outside when shoes bring them in. They distribute across interior floor surfaces, get picked up by bare feet, transferred to other surfaces by contact, and eventually reach people through the various pathways that floor-level chemistry creates. Pediatric health researchers have pointed to shoe removal as one of the simplest and most effective steps for reducing the chemical and microbial load in home environments with young children, precisely because so many of the compounds of concern travel on the soles of shoes from outdoor to indoor surfaces. This isn't a fringe or contested finding. It's been replicated in various forms across multiple research contexts, and it's specific enough and practical enough that researchers themselves tend to change their own home behavior once they've encountered it. Here's the shift. The shoe removal habit isn't a cultural courtesy, it's a chemical barrier. Every time shoes come off at the door, a transfer pathway for outdoor pesticides, bacteria, and contaminants is closed. That closure is worth more than the 30 seconds it takes to do it. Number 5. Taking your shoes off when you arrive home is a physical ritual that helps your brain change states. This one operates completely differently from the previous ones, and it matters in a way that has nothing to do with floor cleanliness. It's about the psychological transition from the outer world to the inner one. Your home is, at its best, a recovery environment, a place where the stress of the outside world is managed, lowered, and eventually left behind. But that transition from work mode or public mode to home mode doesn't happen automatically the moment you walk through the door. It requires a signal, something that tells the brain the context has changed and permission is granted to shift gears. The shoe removal at the genkan functions as exactly that signal. It's a small, physical, unavoidable act that happens at the threshold. You stop, you change what you're wearing on your feet, you step up and in. The action is brief but deliberate, and deliberate physical action at a threshold is one of the most reliable ways to trigger a mental context switch. Many people report that shoes-off homes feel calmer and more relaxed to be in, even when they can't articulate exactly why. Part of the reason is the cleanliness and the quiet contact with clean floors, but part of it is the ritual of the threshold, the fact that arriving home involves a small, deliberate act of transition that marks the boundary between outside and inside in a way that walking straight through without pause does not. Here's the shift. Use the shoe removal moment as a conscious transition point. As you take your shoes off, let that be the moment you mentally leave the day outside. 5 seconds of intention at the threshold. Every day builds a boundary your brain will start to recognize and respond to over time. Number 6. The practical household management benefits compound significantly over time. This is a point that matters quietly in the background of everything else. Outdoor shoe traffic is one of the primary mechanisms by which floor surfaces wear and degrade. The grit, the small stones, the hard outdoor particles carried on shoe soles act as abrasives on indoor floors. Hardwood floors lose their finish faster, tiles scratch more easily, carpet fibers get damaged by the concentrated abrasive action of grit ground in by foot traffic. Remove outdoor shoes at the door, and a significant source of floor wear disappears. The same floor surface genuinely lasts longer, looks better for more years, and requires less maintenance and refinishing over its lifespan. This isn't a minor saving over 20 years of home ownership. It's meaningful. Beyond wear, the reduction in overall cleaning required is substantial. Outdoor shoes are the primary source of visible dirt, tracked debris, and the invisible microbial and chemical contamination covered in the previous points. Remove the source and the floor cleaning frequency drops noticeably. The time and money spent on floor cleaning and maintenance over the lifetime of a home is genuinely significant, and the shoes-off habit is one of the most direct ways to reduce it. Japanese homes traditionally are maintained to a standard of cleanliness that seems effortful from the outside and is actually less effortful once the primary contamination source is removed. A significant portion of Western home cleaning time is spent addressing the contamination that outdoor shoes consistently bring in. Here's the shift. Frame the shoes-off habit partly as a home maintenance decision. The floors it protects, the cleaning it eliminates, and the wear it prevents add up to something genuinely valuable over the years you spend in your home. The habit pays for itself very quickly. Number 7. When children grow up with the shoes-off habit, they internalize the inside-outside boundary in ways that shape their relationship with shared spaces for life. A child who grows up in a shoes-off household learns from the very beginning that there is a meaningful difference between the outside world and the inside one. They learn that arriving home involves a transition, not just a change of location. They learn that indoor floors are spaces you respect because they're clean enough to use fully. They learn that you don't bring the outside world in without thinking about it first. These are not small lessons. They are early, repeated, concrete experiences of the concept that some spaces have different rules, that transitions between contexts require acknowledgement, and that your behavior in a space affects everyone who shares it. These principles, absorbed through the daily ritual of taking shoes off at 6 years old, show up later in behavior towards shared public spaces, respect for common areas, and the general principle of not treating shared environments as though they exist purely for your convenience. The children who clean up their school lunch in the Kyushoku system are the same children who grew up taking their shoes off at the door. The connection isn't coincidental. A culture that teaches children early that shared spaces deserve care through small, daily, physical rituals produces adults who understand that principle without needing it explained. Here's the shift. If you have children, establish the shoes-off habit with them as a non-negotiable from as early as possible. Not as a rule to be enforced with consequences, but as simply how things work in your home, as natural and unquestioned as washing hands before eating. The earlier the habit forms, the more completely it becomes part of how they understand their relationship with spaces. 7 reasons, ranging from the microbiological to the psychological to the architectural, and all of them pointing in the same direction. The shoes-off habit is not a cultural quirk. It's a remarkably efficient practice that simultaneously improves the cleanliness of your environment, reduces your chemical exposure, protects your floors, creates a daily psychological transition ritual, enables floor-level living, reduces your cleaning burden, and teaches children something real and lasting about shared spaces. And the practical reality is that it costs almost nothing to implement. Not zero, because some adjustment is required, both for your household and for guests, but close to zero. A shoe rack by the door, a small basket of guest slippers if you want to offer them, and the decision to simply stop wearing outdoor shoes past the threshold. Here's the 3-step transition for making this genuinely practical rather than just a good idea you intend to start next week. Step 1. Create the visual cue at your door tonight. Put a shoe rack, a small basket, or even a clearly placed mat directly at your entry point in the most visible and unavoidable spot possible, so that removing shoes at the threshold becomes the default action before any other action. The environmental cue is more reliable than memory and stronger than intention. Make the space do the work. Step 2. Handle guests with warmth rather than awkwardness. Keep a few pairs of clean indoor slippers by the door, available and clearly visible. When a guest arrives, offer them a pair before they've had the chance to think about their shoes. Most guests respond positively, often saying their own home does the same, and the ones who find it slightly unusual are perfectly accommodated by the slippers. What feels like a potentially uncomfortable moment becomes a small, hospitable gesture, and one that communicates something about how you care for your home and the people in it. Step 3. Commit fully for 2 weeks before allowing yourself any opinion about whether it's worth the adjustment. The first few days feel slightly unusual because any new habit at a familiar threshold feels slightly unusual. By day 7, the shoes come off automatically before you've consciously decided to remove them. By day 14, you will find yourself genuinely uncomfortable when you accidentally step past the threshold with shoes on, because the floor you've spent 2 weeks keeping clean will suddenly feel different in a way you can actually perceive. That perceptual shift, feeling the difference, is what makes the habit stick permanently rather than fading like a resolution. And that perceptual shift extends beyond the floor itself. People who maintain shoes-off households consistently describe the home feeling quieter and more genuinely restorative than it did before. Whether from the cleaner floor, the threshold ritual, the floor-level living it enables, or some combination of all three, the experience of the space genuinely changes. The home becomes more clearly separated from the outside world, and that separation is itself a form of daily rest. Start tonight, the very next time you walk through your front door. One step, shoes off, step up. That's the whole thing. I'll see you in the next one.